Nia had always been the quiet type, the kind of girl who spoke more with her eyes than her mouth. At 22, fresh out of the University of Lagos, she landed a job that felt too good to be true. Personal secretary to CEO Kelechi Owusu, the youngest tech billionaire in Nigeria, owner of Owusu Tech. People told her he was ruthless, sharp-minded, and dangerous with women. But Nia didn't care. She wasn't interested in any of that. She just wanted to work, send money home to her sick mother in Enugu, and maybe, just maybe, make something of herself. The office on the 18th floor in Victoria Island was like a different world. White marble floors, glass walls, women in heels and men in tight suits who barely smiled. Nia, in her brown ankle-length skirt and soft braids, stood out like a village girl in a fashion show, but she didn't mind. She was used to being underestimated. Her first few weeks were smooth. She came early, stayed late, and learned fast. Kelechi barely noticed her at first. He only spoke to bark orders or asked for files. But one night, everything changed. It was 9:30 p.m. Most of the staff had gone home. Nia stayed behind to finish typing a client proposal when Kelechi walked in, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, frustration written all over his face. He poured himself a drink, leaned on her desk and said, "You're still here?" She nodded. "Yes, sir, just finishing the proposal." He stared at her a little longer than usual. "You're different, Nia." She didn't know what to say to that. Her heart pounded in her chest. There was something in the way he said it, soft but dangerous. From that night on, things shifted. Kelechi started noticing her more. He'd call her into his office for things that didn't really require her. He began asking about her life, her family, her dreams. He sent her flowers on her birthday, took her out for coffee after work. Slowly, the walls began to fall. She was a virgin, yes, but not stupid. She knew where it was going, and deep inside, maybe she wanted it too. Maybe she was tired of being the quiet girl nobody noticed. One Friday night, when the city was soaked, in rain and thunder rolled in the sky, it happened. Kelechi kissed her in the office, and she didn't stop him. He led her to the leather couch in his private lounge and made her feel things she'd only read about in books. It was fast, hot, confusing, and for her, unforgettable. But he didn't call the next day, or the next. In fact, he started acting distant again, like nothing had ever happened. Nia felt hollow, like she'd been opened up and left behind. A month later, her body started feeling strange. Her chest was tender, and the nausea wouldn't go away. She took a test in the office bathroom, hands shaking the whole time. Pregnant. She stared at the stick like it was cursed. She was a virgin just weeks ago. And now she was carrying the baby of a man who wasn't even talking to her. She waited 2 days before telling him. She walked into his office during lunch, voice trembling. "Sir, I'm pregnant," Kelechi froze. For the first time, the confident CEO didn't know what to say. His jaw tightened. "You're sure?" She nodded. "Yes, sir." There was silence. Heavy, bitter silence. Then he stood, walked to the window, and said without looking at her, "You'll have to get rid of it." Just like that. No emotion, no care. Like he was asking her to cancel a meeting. Nia felt her legs weaken. She gripped the chair to stay upright. "Excuse me?" He turned around, his face cold. "I can't have a scandal, Nia. You knew what this was. I'll pay for everything. Just handle it quietly." Her heart cracked in places she didn't know existed. She walked out of his office without saying another word. Her ears were ringing. It felt like the walls were closing in. The polished tiles under her heels seemed to shift with every step she took, and by the time she reached the elevator, tears had blurred her vision. She didn't cry out loud, though, not yet. That kind of pain needed silence first, and later, maybe later, it would need fire. The ride down from the 18th floor felt longer than usual. Each ding of the elevator felt like a slap to her pride. She had given him something sacred, her trust, her body, her heart, her innocence, and he had treated it like a mistake to be cleaned up. A PR problem. Outside, Lagos was its usual chaotic self. Cars honking, people shouting, life moving like her world hadn't just crumbled. She stood at the gate of the building, hugging herself as the wind slapped against her dress. It wasn't the cold that made her shake. It was the storm brewing inside her chest. When she finally got to her small one-room apartment in Surulere, she dropped everything and collapsed onto her bed. That was when she let herself cry, loud, angry sobs that felt like they were being pulled out from her soul. She cried for her mother, who didn't deserve more disappointment. She cried for herself, for being foolish enough to believe that behind that expensive cologne and tailored suits was a man who saw her as more than just a night's comfort. For 3 days, she stayed home. She ignored his calls. Yes, he called. Maybe guilt had caught up with him. Maybe he realized she wasn't going to handle it quietly. But Nia wasn't ready to speak. Her head was spinning, her emotions tangled, and her body was tired. She could feel life inside her, already forming, already whispering, "Don't let them erase me." She finally returned to work the next Monday. People looked at her with a strange curiosity, like they could sense something had shifted. She walked straight to her desk, ignoring the glances. Kelechi didn't come out of his office that morning. Coward, she thought. Around lunchtime, his assistant came to her. "Desk, he wants to see you." She stood up, fixed her skirt, and walked in with her chin high. She wasn't going to beg or cry, not anymore. He was seated behind his desk, looking polished as always, but his eyes had a flicker of something she hadn't seen before. Uncertainty. "You didn't return my calls," he said. "You told me to get rid of my baby," she replied flatly. He sighed, leaned back, and looked away. "This isn't personal, Naya. You know how this world works. I can't afford—" "You already afforded me, sir," she cut in, voice sharp like a blade. "What more is there to pay for?" He blinked. Her tone shocked him. "I'll keep—" "The baby," she said, "with or without your permission." "And do what?" he snapped. "Raise a child in that tiny apartment? On your salary? You think this is a movie, Nia?" She didn't flinch. "Better to raise a child with love in a small apartment than to raise regret in a mansion." He stood up, voice rising. "You don't understand, Nia. This baby will ruin everything I've built." She looked at him dead in the eye. "Then maybe what you built wasn't strong enough." They stared at each other in silence for a long moment. Finally, he sat back down, running a hand through his hair. "Fine, keep it, but don't expect me to be part of it." "I won't," she said. "But one day, when that child is old enough to ask where their father is, I'll tell them he was a powerful man who was too weak to face his own blood." She turned and walked out, each step steady, powerful, and full of quiet rebellion. Everyone watched her as she passed through the office floor, but she didn't care. She was carrying life now, and no one, not even a billionaire CEO, was going to make her feel ashamed of it. Word about Nia's pregnancy didn't take long to travel. Offices like Owusu Tech didn't need gossip blogs. Staff whispers were quicker, sharper, and cut deeper. The air at work had changed. Conversations would suddenly stop when she walked into the break room. People looked at her with a mix of pity and judgment. Some even smiled at her like she was a joke that had finally told itself. But Nia kept her head high. She wore her bump like a quiet badge of defiance. She didn't hide it under loose clothes. She didn't walk with shame in her step. Every time someone glanced at her stomach with those sly eyes, she stared back like, "Say something, I dare you." Kelechi didn't fire her. That surprised everyone. Some said it was guilt. Others claimed he was just scared she'd go public and damage his brand. Nia didn't care what his reasons were. She was focused on surviving. She stopped waiting for him to acknowledge the baby or offer support. Instead, she started saving harder. She cut back on everything. No more Uber rides, no more salon trips, no more chicken suya from the stand she loved. She even stopped sending as much money home, though that broke her heart. Her mother noticed something was wrong, of course. "Nia, are you eating well? You sound tired these days." "I'm fine, Mama. Work is just stressful." "You don't sound fine, my daughter. You know you can tell me anything." But how could she tell her mother the truth? That her only child had gotten pregnant by a man who saw her as disposable? That her big city job had come with a price no one warned her about? She kept it all locked inside, until one day Mama showed up. Nia got home late one evening to find her mother seated on the bed, looking around the tiny room with that same mix of love and quiet disappointment. She stood up and hugged Nia tightly, then stepped back, eyes narrowing. "You're pregnant." Nia's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her mother sat back down. "And you weren't going to tell me?" I was waiting for the right time. There is never a right time for this kind of news, Nia. Her voice was calm, but there was hurt buried in it. Does he know? Yes. And? He told me to get rid of it. Mama closed her eyes, her face still. A long silence followed. You will not do that, she said finally. I wasn't planning to. Good. You are my daughter. You may have made a mistake, but you will not make it worse by erasing an innocent life. Nia burst into tears. That night, they cooked rice together. In the small kitchen corner, her mother massaged her feet while telling her stories about her own pregnancy. For the first time in weeks, Nia felt like she could breathe again. But the peace didn't last long. One rainy Thursday morning, as Nia walked into the office, she noticed something strange. Security guards whispering, glancing at her. Her ID card didn't scan at the main entrance. One of the guards gently said, "Sorry, Madam Nia, we were told to escort you to HR." Her stomach dropped. She was led into a cold room where a woman in a stiff blazer handed her a document. Termination of contract, it read. Why? Nia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Poor performance, absenteeism, disruption of work environment, the woman recited like it was memorized. Nia scoffed. I see. So now being pregnant is disruptive. The HR lady didn't respond. She gathered her things in silence. Nobody met her eyes as she walked out with her cardboard box. The glass walls that once felt powerful now looked like cages. She didn't even get a goodbye. Outside, rain started again. Harder this time. She stood under the bus stop, clutching. Her box, stomach heavy with life, heart heavy with betrayal. She had given everything to that company, to that man. And now she was walking away with nothing but a broken job and a child he didn't want. But in that moment, something inside her hardened. A small voice in her head whispered, "This is not the end, this is the beginning." The next few weeks were a storm of emotions. Anger, fear, shame, but also something else. Fire. Nia had been silent for too long. People had played with her life like it was a game. But now she was done being quiet. She spent her days applying for jobs, walking from one office to another with her swollen belly and worn-out shoes. Some employers gave her that look. You're pregnant, you're a liability. Others pretended to be kind, only to ghost her afterward. Still, she kept moving. Mama stayed with her longer than expected, helping stretch every kobo they had. They sold some old jewelry, skipped meals, and prayed every night by candlelight. Mama even tried calling an old friend who worked in a women's NGO. Maybe they can help, she said. Nia nodded but didn't expect much. But it was one afternoon in a small clinic that things shifted. She had gone in for a checkup. The nurse was kind, young, warm, with beads in her hair. She looked at Nia's chart, then her face. You don't smile much, she said gently. I haven't had much to smile about, Nia replied. You're carrying a child. That alone is reason to hold your head high. They got to talking. Turns out the nurse was part of a network of women helping single mothers find stability, housing, work, legal support. She gave Nia a number. Call her. Her name is Ijoma. She knows how to handle men like your boss. At first, Nia hesitated. Legal support? What could she really do? The man was a CEO, rich, powerful, with lawyers in his pocket. Who would believe her word against his? But then she remembered the look in Kalechi's eyes, the way he said, "Get rid of it," like she was trash. So she called Ijoma was not what Nia expected. She was fierce, bold, dressed in Ankara trousers and boots with locks piled on her head like a crown. She met Nia at a cafe and listened without interrupting. When Nia finished, Ijoma sipped her drink and said, "You were his employee. He used his power to take advantage of you. He got you pregnant and fired you illegally. That's workplace abuse." "I don't have proof," Nia whispered. "You don't need a smoking gun. You're not the first woman he's done this to." Nia's eyes widened. "There are others?" "3, Ijoma said, sliding her phone across the table. On the screen were screenshots, emails, messages, even voice notes from former employees. One of them even had a pregnancy that mysteriously disappeared after a private meeting. With HR, Ijoma leaned in, her voice low but firm. We build the case, we go public. You speak your truth and we let the city burn if it has to. That night, Nia barely slept. She stared at the ceiling, one hand on her belly, the other holding Mama's rosary. Could she really do it? Take on a man like Kelechi, risk everything for justice? And then, just before dawn, she made her decision. Yes. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Ijoma gathered statements from the other women. Nia gave her full testimony, including dates, messages, even a recorded phone call she had with HR after being fired. They filed the legal paperwork. And then they leaked the story to the E! Press. It exploded. Tech CEO impregnates secretary, orders abortion, then fires her. Owusu Tech accused of exploiting female staff. Justice for Nia trends across Nigeria. Kelechi tried to deny it at first. His PR team issued a cold statement, calling it a malicious attempt to destroy a respected businessman's reputation. But social media didn't care. Women shared their stories, men debated, hashtags flew. Celebrities posted about it. Even politicians started making noise. It was no longer just about Nia. It was about every woman who had been used and discarded like she didn't matter. And in the center of it all stood Nia. Not hidden, not ashamed, pregnant, fired, betrayed, but strong, fierce, powerful in her truth. The backlash was more than Kelechi had expected. He thought it would pass. Just noise on Twitter. A few angry threads, a trending hashtag, maybe even a protest or two. But it didn't pass. It grew, like wildfire on dry land. The morning after. The leak reporters were already camping outside Owusu Tech's headquarters. They weren't just asking about Nia anymore. They were digging into company finances, former employees, and sexual harassment complaints that had been quietly buried over the years. And the board was furious. By the end of the week, an emergency meeting was called. Kelechi stormed in wearing his usual sharp grey suit, but he looked tired, shadows under his eyes, lips tight. He didn't even sit down before the chairman spoke. "You've made this company a liability," he said coldly. "It's not that serious," Kelechi replied. "We'll ride it out," the CFO cut in. "You're under investigation by the Labor Commission. 3 women are coming forward with legal affidavits. This is very serious." Still, he resisted. "You think pushing me out will fix it? I built this company." "You also might destroy it," the chairman interrupted. By the time the meeting ended, he was suspended. "Until further notice," they said. Nia found out that night while watching the news. The anchor's voice was calm, but the words were fire. "Kelechi Owusu, billionaire founder of Owusu Tech, has stepped down pending an internal investigation into multiple allegations of sexual misconduct." Mama clapped her hands together and shouted, "God, they finally see." Nia didn't speak. She just sat there, one hand on her belly, the other over her lips. Not smiling, not crying. Just feeling. Every ache, every humiliation, every silent scream from those office nights, now shifting into something else. Peace? No, it wasn't that simple. But maybe power. The next few days were surreal. NGOs reached out offering support. Women she'd never met before stopped her in markets and whispered, "You're brave." Her story was being used in university debates. A radio station asked her to do a phone interview. She declined, not because she was afraid, but because she was still learning how to speak for herself outside of pain. And then, one afternoon, her phone buzzed. Kelechi. She hadn't heard from him since the day she was fired. She stared at the screen for a long time, heart hammering. Mama noticed and said, "Don't answer him." But something inside her needed to hear it. She stepped outside, sat on the cement step of the compound, and finally picked up. "Nia," his voice came through, low, almost broken. "Can we talk?" She didn't reply. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she almost laughed. "Sorry, was that what you said when you used someone like a toy and threw them away? I didn't expect this to happen," he continued. "I made mistakes, I panicked, but I want to make things right." "Now that you've lost your throne," she said, voice sharp. There was silence. "I want to support the child. I have money. I'm not calling for your money, Kelechi. I know, but I don't want my child to grow up hating me. Nia stared at the sky, the clouds drifting slowly like time itself was catching its breath. I won't teach my child to hate you, she said, but I also won't lie to them about who you were. He didn't respond. What could he say? Before she ended the call, she added, "This child will grow knowing that their mother didn't bow even when the world tried to break her." She hung up. That night, Nia finally allowed herself a smile. Small, soft, but real. Not because things were easy now. They weren't. She was still jobless, still facing childbirth with limited resources. But something had changed in the air around her. She wasn't the poor secretary anymore. She wasn't the girl who cried in the elevator. She was Nia, the woman who fought back. And soon, she would be a mother. The day her water broke, Lagos was in one of its usual chaotic moods. Traffic jammed, the sky heavy with heat, and everyone shouting louder than the next. Mama had just stepped out to buy pepper and smoked fish for dinner when Nia felt it. A sharp, sudden pain, then a warm wetness down her legs. She froze. At first she thought maybe she was imagining it. But then another pain, deeper, stronger, rushed through her belly, and this time she let out a sound. Not a scream, but close. By the time Mama returned, Nia was on her knees, gripping the arm of the chair, sweat breaking across her forehead. "Jesus, it's time-o!" Mama shouted, dropping the shopping bag and rushing to her side. With the help of the neighbor's old Toyota and more prayers than petrol, they made it to the clinic. It was small, hot, and not the private hospital Kelechi probably would have sent her to had he still been in the picture. But Nia didn't care about marble floors or soft beds. She just wanted her baby out and safe. Labor was war. Hours passed like centuries. She screamed, cried, bit her lips until they bled. At one point she begged for it to stop. Another contraction hit, and she cursed every man that ever existed. And then, just before midnight, with her body shaking and her mind on the edge of fading, she heard it. A cry. High, sharp, angry, like the child already knew the world it had been born into. The nurse held up the baby, smiling. "It's a girl." Nia reached out, tears spilling from her eyes. They placed the tiny warm body on her chest, and something in her shifted permanently. All the pain, the betrayal, the judgment, none of it mattered in that moment. She named her Zuri. It meant beautiful in Swahili. In the weeks that followed, Nia began building a new kind of life. It was hard, money was tight, her body was healing slowly. But Zuri gave her strength. Every cry, every tiny hand grab, reminded her that she had something worth fighting for. Mama stayed by her side, bathing the baby with warm cloths, singing Igbo lullabies late into the night. Neighbors came with food, old baby clothes, and advice. Nia never asked for but appreciated anyway. But the outside world hadn't forgotten her story. A women's rights group offered her a part-time job managing outreach. Another NGO asked if she'd speak at a small conference. At first, she hesitated. What? Did she have to say, really? But then she remembered all those nights in the office, all those girls like her who stayed silent because they were afraid. She said yes. At her first event, standing before a crowd of 50 women, some young, some old, all listening with wide eyes, she told her story. From the village to the office to the betrayal to Zuri. When she finished, people stood and clapped, not out of pity but out of respect. She got offers after that, more speaking gigs, interviews, a documentary pitch. She even started a small blog called Dear Nia, where young women sent her questions about life, work and standing tall in a world built to silence them. And Kelechi? He disappeared from the public for a while. The board ousted him permanently. His reputation was stained. His new startup failed before it even launched. People started calling him the billionaire who couldn't handle a baby. One rainy evening she received a letter, no return address. Inside was a check, 10 million naira, and a short note in Kelechi's handwriting. For Zuri, I know it won't fix anything, but maybe it can help her become more than I ever deserved. Nia stared at the check for a long time. She didn't cash it. Instead, she framed the note and hung it near her blog desk. Not out of forgiveness, but as a reminder of what power used to look like, and what real power was now. Zuri was almost 2 when the invitation arrived. It came tucked inside a plain white envelope, slid under the door like it didn't want to be noticed. At first, Nia thought it was another bill or a flyer, but when she opened it, her eyes narrowed. In disbelief, Owusu Tech Women in Tech Summit Guest of Honor. Nia Okoye, her hands trembled slightly. At the bottom was a message typed in bold italics, recognizing voices that sparked change. She sat down slowly, the weight of the paper heavier than it looked. It had been nearly 2 years since she walked out of that building, pregnant and fired. 2 years of rebuilding, surviving, becoming someone else. She wasn't just Nia the secretary anymore. She was Nia the advocate, Nia the speaker, Nia the writer, the mother. Still, the name Owusu Tech pulled memories out of her like thorns. Kelechi's voice, cold and sharp, telling her to abort, the sting of whispered gossip. The sound of her own heart breaking in an elevator with glass walls and no mercy. But she was different now. She could face it. At the event, the room was full of polished executives, journalists, tech entrepreneurs, and college girls hungry for inspiration. Cameras flashed as she entered in her deep emerald dress, Zuri's initials embroidered on the sleeve. Her hair was in a proud puff, her back straight, her smile unshaken. People came up to her like she was a celebrity. Some took selfies, others whispered "thank you" in her ear with tears in their eyes. The room was glowing, but quieted the second her name was announced on stage. She stepped up to the mic, cleared her throat, and spoke. I used to be a girl who sat in the back of the room, who apologized for existing, who thought silence was safety, but silence cost me more than noise ever did. The audience held their breath. I was hired to be a secretary. I became a scapegoat. I got pregnant by a man who didn't love me, didn't respect me, and saw me as disposable. But that baby, my daughter, became the beginning of something powerful. She gave me fire. She gave me purpose. Heads nodded across the hall. I was pushed out of this company in shame. Today, I walk back in on my own terms, not to ask for forgiveness, but to remind the world what happens when you try to silence the wrong woman. The room erupted in applause. People stood up. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the back, sitting quietly in a plain suit without security or spotlight, was Kelechi. Nia saw him. He hadn't aged much, but his eyes looked older. He watched her like someone watching the sun from a distance, beautiful, blinding, and far out of reach. After the event, she found him outside by the parking lot, standing by a black car, alone. He turned when he saw her. "Congratulations," he said. She nodded. "I didn't think you'd come. I needed to." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Guilt." He shook his head. "Closure." There was silence. Heavy. Thick with all the things they had never said. "She looks like you," he said quietly. "She laughs like you," she replied, surprising even herself. "I'm not asking to be in her life," he added quickly. "I know I lost that right." Nia studied his face. He wasn't the powerful CEO anymore. He looked like a man learning how to live with the ashes of what he burned. "You didn't lose the right, Kelechi," she said softly. "You gave it away." He nodded slowly, his eyes glossing just a little. "I'll send money for her school when the time comes, no strings." Nia paused. "Thank you." She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "She'll know your name, Kelechi, but not because of what you did to me." He looked confused. "She'll know your name because of what I became after you left." Then she walked away, not because she was angry, but because she no longer needed anything from him. Not his guilt, not his money, not even his apology. Years passed, the kind that move slow in the moment but fast when you look back. Zuri was 8 now, bright, loud, fearless. She asked a million questions, always running around with her curly hair tied in 2 bouncing puffs. She had her father's eyes, but her mother's fire. There was something unshakable about her, even at such a young age, like she already knew she came from struggle and from strength. Nia had built a life, not just a surviving kind of life, but a thriving one. Her blog, Dear Nia, had grown into a full platform. She ran workshops for single mothers, spoke at universities, and even launched a digital series on women's rights in the workplace. Her name wasn't whispered anymore. It was spoken with respect. She bought a small flat in Leakey. Nothing fancy, but it had space, light, and a tiny balcony where Zuri planted fake flowers and called it her garden of big dreams. Mama had moved back to the village, proud and peaceful. She sometimes called just to cry happy tears. "My daughter," she'd say, "they tried to break you, but look at you now. You turned pain into power." Sometimes Nia would look at old photos of herself in that office, young and unsure, back when she thought being invisible was the safest way to exist. She didn't recognize that girl anymore, but she loved her. Because that girl had survived, that girl had given birth to a woman. Kelechi never tried to reach out again. Once a year, a check would arrive. Quiet, no message, no expectations. Nia put it away, saved it all under Zuri's name. One day she'd hand it over and say, "This is what your father gave you. But here's what I gave you." And then she'd show her the books she wrote, the lives she touched, the legacy she built. One evening, Zuri came home from school, plopped her bag on the floor, and asked a question that made Nia's heart skip. "Mummy, where's my daddy?" Nia was quiet for a moment. She walked to the window, looked out at the fading sun, then turned back to her daughter. "Your daddy, he wasn't ready to be a father when you came, but he gave me the most beautiful thing he ever could." Zuri blinked. "Me?" Nia smiled. "Exactly you. Do you hate him?" "No," Nia said softly. "I don't. I just outgrew him." Zuri nodded like she understood. Maybe not fully, but enough. "Can I meet him one day?" "If you ever want to, I won't stop you, but promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll never think his absence means you weren't enough." Zuri ran over and hugged her, tiny arms wrapping tight around Nia's waist. "I never think that. I'm enough because I have you." And just like that, Nia knew. This was the end of the story that once broke her, and the beginning of the one her daughter would write, one that started not in heartbreak, but in healing.